Hello and welcome to the Newsroom. Let's have a look at the stories breaking this hour. Senior spokesperson for the World Food Programme, Abir Effeta, has issued a statement on the aid supply to Gaza. Effeta stated that the WFP has been able to bring in only about half of the food aid required to meet the needs of the people in Gaza. She added that to deliver aid on a larger scale, more broader crossings need to be opened, especially the northern part of the territory. Effeta said that this was with winter approaching and agencies must reach as many people as possible. She highlighted that the food needs in Gaza remain high and the food security situation is acute. Let's in fact listen in to her statements.
We need to get to the 1.6 million people with full rations. We need full access. We need everything to be moving fast. We are in a race against time. The winter months are coming. People are still suffering from hunger, and the needs are overwhelming. So in terms of where we are today, it's few steps forward, but it's not as far as we would like it to be. And this is why we would like to have the access to the urgency of opening the northern border crossing points, because that will get us fast to the north of Gaza, where we know that the food needs are high and the food security situation is acute. We still have only 2 border crossing points that are operational. This severely limits the quantity of aid that WFP and other agencies are able to bring in to stabilize the markets and to address people's needs. Getting food into the north remains difficult. A major obstacle is the continued closure of the northern crossings into the Gaza Strip. Aid convoys are obliged to follow a slow, difficult route from the south. So, rather than coming directly from these northern border crossing points, we have to drive all the way from the south, going through difficult territories and damaged roads and infrastructure to be able to access the north. We need to get to the 1.6 million people with full rations. We need full access. We need everything to be moving fast. We are in a race against time. The winter months are coming. People are still suffering from hunger, and the needs are overwhelming. So in terms of where we are today, it's few steps forward, but it's not as far as we would like it to be. And this is why we would like to have the access to the urgency of opening the northern border crossing points, because that will get us fast to the north of Gaza, where we know that the food needs are high and the food security situation is acute. We still have only 2 border crossing points that are operational. This severely limits the quantity of aid that WFP and other agencies are able to bring in to stabilize.
Now, the World Summit for Social Development in Doha, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has urged an immediate halt to the fighting in Sudan, calling it a nightmare of violence. He appealed to both the Sudanese armed forces and the rapid support forces to stop the flow of weapons and come to the negotiating table under the guidance of his envoy. Guterres also voiced deep concern over the violations of the Gaza ceasefire, which ended 2 years of devastating conflict, urging all parties to uphold the peace agreement. The UN chief's remarks come as Sudan's humanitarian crisis worsens. Let's take a listen in to what Antonio Guterres had to say.
I call for an end to the flow of weapons and fighters into Sudan, which is making a desperate situation even worse. And finally, we need an immediate cessation of hostilities. I call both on the Sudanese armed forces and the rapid support forces to work with my personal envoy for Sudan, Ramtan Lamamra, towards a negotiated settlement. Come to the negotiating table. Bring an end to this nightmare of violence now. It's time for peace. I'm also deeply concerned about the continued violations of the ceasefire in Gaza. They must stop, and all parties must abide by the decisions of the first phase of the peace agreement.
Now, in Iraq, Prime Minister Mohammed Sia al-Sudani is positioning himself as the leader who can bring lasting stability as the country heads towards parliamentary elections on November the 11th. Sudani, who has been in power since 2022, is seeking a second term, running against some of the same Shiite parties and armed groups that helped him rise to office. He's campaigning on improving basic services, fighting corruption, and balancing Iraq's ties with both Washington and Tehran. The 55-year-old premier, who never left Iraq even during the years of conflict, remains the frontrunner, though forming a government would still require complex coalition building. Sudani's popularity has risen through major infrastructure and hiring programs, but critics warn his policies risk empowering hardline fractions and deepening Iraq's economic strain as he bids for another term. Now moving on, the death toll from Monday's powerful earthquake in northern Afghanistan has risen to 27, with nearly 1,000 people being injured. The 6.3 magnitude quake struck near Kaloum in Sangmangan province, destroying homes and leaving entire families homeless. The tremors were felt as far as Kabul and neighbouring countries, causing panic upon residents. Officials say most casualties were reported in Sangmangan and Balkh provinces, with additional damage in Balgan, Kunduz, Sar-e-Pul and Jawzjan. Survivors now face bitter winter conditions as they clear rubble and search for missing family members. Let's take a listen in to some of the survivors.
واقعی که رخ داد اون ساعت ما ندیدیم اون وقت شو یک دفعه خیلی همین چی شده گامد تکان خورد ما خیستیم ما دور خاکه همسر ما خیستیم خودیم ما در دولس خواب بودیم سه دخترکم خانه خواب بود دو بچه نو خانه خواب بود یک دفعه خیستیم تکان شد خیستیم تا ما بیرون برآمدیم هم یک شدت زور که آمد یا خودیم ما در جانیم خود کلاغ چستیم دیگه خودیم ما چستیم میره بیار کشیدیم اون یکیش از دنیا رفت یک دختری ما یکی زخمی بود بیار بردیم شفاخانه اینجا از شفاخانه اکسیلون تیر کرد بیار ماکس دانشگیری یک کمی هوشیار که شد با انتقال دادیم در مزار اینا فعلا خواهمونجا مزار است تا اوناس خودیم ما ندیدیم یک قوم را همونجا ماندیم اینجا خودیم ما جنازه سر ندیدیم
یعنی من یک به شب حادثه رخ داد یعنی من خانه‌ام تخریب شد خودم من ملازم مکتب هستم از برادرم تخریب شد از اون برادر از چهار برادر کلش تخریب شده خانه ما شهید دادیم زخمی دادیم این منطقه یعنی در مشکلات بسیار سخت قرار داریم که یعنی جای شیشتن ما نداریم یعنی همش خراب و ویران است فامیل مکتب بردیم به خاطر خانه تخریب شد جای نداشتیم منطقه خراب بردیم اونجا مکتب در میدان دشت و برادر میدان اونم پرت افتیم که از این بعدش خدا چی میکنه که زمستان است پیش آمد خراب است جای نه شیشتن داریم نه جای رفتن داریم.
Now, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Mao Ning has issued a statement on the earthquake in Afghanistan. The statement informed that China is closely monitoring the earthquake situation, and the ministry also stated that China is ready to provide assistance according to the Afghani needs. The Foreign Ministry expressed its condolences to the victims, with earlier a 6.3 magnitude earthquake striking the northern province of Afghanistan, near the city of Mazar-e-Sharif in particular, injuring hundreds. And the Chinese government has maintained continued engagement with the Taliban government and has been pushing for closer ties with Kabul. China also provided assistance during the earthquake earlier this year that killed more than 2,200 people in Afghanistan. Let's listen in to what the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson had to say.
中方也在密切关注阿富汗的地震灾情，我们对遇难者表示深切哀悼，向遇难者家属和受伤人员表示诚挚慰问。我们相信，在阿富汗政府的领导下，阿富汗人民一定能够战胜灾害，重建家园。那么，中方也愿意根据阿富汗的需要提供帮助。
Well, now in Europe, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has slammed Hungary's Viktor Orban, accusing him of providing support to Moscow. President Zelensky stated that Hungary is blocking Ukraine's membership to the European Union, while highlighting the fact that Ukraine did not get any support from Hungary against the war in the war with Russia. Hungary has vetoed Ukraine's entry into the EU formally, as President of the EU Council vetoed Ukraine's bid in July of last year. The row escalated when Viktor Orban convened the national consultation to gauge Hungarian citizens' views on EU membership. The standoff between Ukraine and Russia continues as the leaders continue the trade allegations against one another. Meanwhile, EU's Enlargement Commissioner Marta Kos has accused Georgia of backsliding on fundamentals of European Union membership processes. She made the statement as Brussels unveiled its annual scorecard for countries seeking EU membership. Let's take a listen in to what she had to say.
Amid the challenges caused by Russia's war of aggression, Ukraine has demonstrated its commitments to its EU path, moving forward on key reforms. Steps already taken are laying the foundations for recovery and opening space for greater private sector involvement. It will be essential to sustain this momentum and prevent any risk of backsliding, in particular anti-corruption. Following the last year's European Council conclusions that the Georgian government's actions have de facto led to a halt of the pre-accession process, and in light of Georgia's continued backsliding on the fundamentals since then, the Commission considers Georgia a candidate country in name.
Now, Ukrainian police have evacuated 9 civilians from the embattled city of Konstantinivka in the Donetsk region as Russian forces intensify their assault on the eastern front line. Officers from the White Angel evacuation unit have moved through streets lined with destroyed buildings and vehicles to reach trapped residents. Many of those rescued were elderly, unwilling or unable to leave despite continuous shelling. Police have also said that they discovered the body of a woman killed in a recent strike. Her son, who assisted in retrieving the body, described how 2 direct hits struck the next-door building while they were inside. Let's take a listen in to what a resident had to say.
Никакого толка, бах и все. А я на лавочке сидела. Ногу сильно ударил, я не знаю, какие вообще. И крыша, и все.
Now we stay in Europe, and British Finance Minister Rachel Reeves has framed her second annual budget as one of the hard choices to secure public spending while reducing Britain's debt, signalling possible broad tax rises to avoid a return to austerity just 3 weeks before delivering the budget. Reeves has set out the difficult economic backdrop which she was wrestling with, pointing to high debt levels, low productivity and stubborn inflation. Reeves has now vowed to do what she says is necessary nor popular in the upcoming November budget. Let's take a listen in to what Reeves, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, had to say.
Никакого толка, бах и все. А я на лавочке сидела. И ногу сильно ударил, я не знаю, какие вообще. И крыша, и все.
Now, a Romanian worker who was trapped for hours under the rubble of a partially collapsed medieval tower near the Colosseum in central Rome has died. According to reports, the man was pulled out of the tower by emergency services late on Monday after about 11 hours, but was in a state of cardiac arrest when he arrived and was declared dead in hospital. A second Romanian worker was also pulled out almost immediately and hospitalized with serious but not life-threatening head injuries, while 2 more workers suffered minor injuries and declined hospital treatment. The tower, which was due to be converted into a museum and conference space, is located halfway along the Via Dea Fiore Impali, the broad avenue that leads from central Piazza Venezia to the local Colosseum. Let's take a listen in to what the local officers had to say.
È che sarà molto lunga e complessa perché il rischio di crollo è altissimo. Ci proveremo in tutte le maniere, la priorità assoluta è salvare questa vita umana, però sarà un'operazione lunga, ecco questo.
Now, David Beckham was knighted by King Charles at Windsor Castle in recognition of his decades-long contributions to sport and charitable causes. The 50-year-old former England captain received the honour more than 20 years after being previously recognised for his impact on football. Beckham shared a warm exchange with the King and told reporters he cried when he first learned of the knighthood. Let's take a listen in.
I think that, you know, being an East London boy, you know, growing up in Leytonstone, moving to Manchester and now stood here at Windsor Castle with His Majesty the King giving me a knighthood is something that I could never have imagined happening to me. You know, my dream as a young boy was always to become a professional footballer, play for Manchester United and represent my country, and luckily enough I got to do that. But you know, everything else that has come with, you know, my career and what I've done, and obviously the philanthropic work that I do, you know, I think that that's what's special about today. It's not just because of my sport, it's because of the philanthropic work that I've done from a very early age. I think I was talking about it last night with my parents, that I think I started, you know, charity work when I was 15, 16 at Manchester United, and then obviously went on to, you know, become UNICEF ambassador and working for the Royal Foundation and you know, the King's Foundation and Malaria No More and the Armed Forces. So you know, I've been very lucky to work for very important charities around the world.
Now born in East London, Beckham made his Premier League debut for Manchester United in 1995, winning 6 league titles, 2 FA Cups and the Champions League before playing for Real Madrid, LA Galaxy, AC Milan and Paris Saint-Germain. Retiring in 2013 with 115 England caps, he became known for his precise free kicks and commercial success, working with brands such as UNICEF and a UNICEF ambassador. Voters in New Jersey headed to the polls to choose their next governor in a hotly contested race, seen as a bellwether for the second Trump administration. The race has turned into one of the most closely watched campaigns, with polls showing Democrat Mike Sherrill and Congresswoman and former Navy pilot holding a slight lead over Republican challenger Jack Ciaratelli, a former state lawmaker and small business owner. The campaign has broken statewide spending records, with both national parties investing millions of dollars as voting continues. Local residents shared their thoughts. Let's take a listen in to what some voters had to say.
To be honest, I think they're voting against what they're seeing in the president's administration. You know, whatever Trump is doing is a little bit insane out there. So most of people are just changing sides and voting against that. So that means, unfortunately, voting, you know, Democrat or independent versus Republican. So I think Ciaratelli has more experience than Sherrill. You know, I think he's better to handle all the problems that we're facing right now, especially all these prices going up. Normal folks can't afford things anymore.
There's going to be folks that certainly vote along their what they feel the president is doing now. I think some people have legitimate concerns about the way the state is going and who's going to take the next steps, and I do think that you'll see a split, or people will split on those decisions.
Now, former Vice President Dick Cheney, a key architect of the 2003 Iraq invasion and regarded as one of the most powerful vice presidents in US history, has died at the age of 84. House Speaker Mike Johnson, a Republican and ally of President Donald Trump, has offered condolences to Cheney's family, saying Scripture calls for giving honor where honor is due. Let's take a listen in.
Good morning, everyone. We'll just say a word before you begin here. Our condolences, our prayers go out to the Cheney family. Of course, we've had the loss now of former Vice President Dick Cheney. Scripture is very clear. We give honor where honor is due, and someone who gave their life, loved their country, loved serving their country in so many capacities. As you know, Dick Cheney served as Vice President. He served as a Secretary of Defense. He served as a congressman, of course, from Wyoming, and as the youngest chief of staff to any president in the history of the country. And so the honor is certainly due to him, and our prayers go out to the family.
Cheney was a vocal critic of Trump and supported his daughter, former Congresswoman Liz Cheney, in her vote to impeach the president. Known for his influential role in shaping US foreign policy, Cheney's legacy spans decades in government service, including his tenure as vice president under George W. Bush. His passing marks the end of a significant chapter in American politics, with impact felt across both domestic and international affairs. Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar is on his first visit to India, becoming the 5th Israeli minister to travel to the country this year. Gideon's first visit focuses on the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor, which was initially proposed in September of 2023 at the G20 Leaders Summit in Delhi. The IMEC aims to develop a clean hydrogen pipeline, an electricity link, a high-speed undersea digital cable, and to integrate existing infrastructure, including ports. Gideon Saar, in a meeting with Indian External Affairs Minister Jai Shankar, discussed about their fight against terrorism, including the need for a zero-tolerance approach towards the menace from the world community, and ways to ramp up cooperation in trade, infrastructure, and regional connectivity through projects such as the India-Middle East-Europe corridor. Saar described the radical terror as a threat to both sides and reiterated Israel's condemnation of the terror attack in Pahalgam in April. Let's listen in to what the Israeli minister had to say.
Our goal is to build a long-term strategic partnership between Israel and India. Your Excellency, radical terror is a mutual threat to Israel and India. We strongly condemn the horrific terror attack in Pahalgam. In the Middle East, Israel faces a unique phenomenon which I call terror states. The radical terror states of Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and Houthis in Yemen have established themselves over the past decades. Uprooting them is necessary for the security and stability of our region.
Now, Nigerians across the religious spectrum are reacting to US President Donald Trump's threats of military intervention over the killing of Christians in the country, roughly evenly split between Christians and Muslims. The most populous African nation is home to a myriad of conflicts, but claims of Christian persecution in Nigeria have found traction online among the US and European right in recent months. This comes in light of President Trump's statement that he had asked the US Department of War to prepare a possible plan of attack. Let's take a listen in to what citizens had to say.
There are some conspiracy theories about even the purpose of this announcement by the President Trump, but we don't believe in rumor or hearsay. We believe the President of America should listen to good voices from this country, reliable and honest voices from this country, and rethink over this his so-called decision.
Mr. Trump has interior motive. It's not to our own advantage. There are more to it. So I think, if you ask me, I advise Mr. President, our President, Asiwaju Ahmed Tinubu, to find a political solution to it.
When you talk about killing in place like Plateau, in place like Benue, where you have almost 80% of their population as Christian, then if you are now saying it's not genocide, then you are not being fair.
Now, with that, it's a wrap on the newsroom.